Hi, Father James Martin S.J. Welcome and peace in Christ. I am so grateful to have you on my podcast, Hean Ba Klean, in English, Rowing into the Deep. This podcast aims to share vocation stories and faith experiences. So through our conversation, you will help me and people to learn something new and deepen their faith and understanding of vocation and faith. So once again, for our audience and followers and the people of God, Father James Martin is an American Jesuit priest, an acclaimed author of many books, and a prominent voice in a modern Catholicism. He is also a creator of a podcast called The Spiritual Life with Father James Martin S.J. So once again, welcome and good evening to you, Father James Martins.
Well, thank you, my brother. Great to be with you. I can say good morning to you because we're so far away. I'm here in New York City. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and thank you for all the great work you do, and happy to enter into a conversation with you.
So thank you, Father James. Without further ado, I am going to ask you about your vocation story and your life and experience about faith. So can you tell me a little bit about how was your upbringing, a Catholic upbringing in your family?
Sure. So I was born in 1960, maybe a long time before a lot of your listeners, in Philadelphia, which is on the East Coast, as you know, of the United States. My father has died, but he was Catholic. My mom is still alive. She's Catholic. So Irish American Catholic and Italian American Catholic. So I, uh, was baptized Catholic and had my first Holy Communion and had confirmation and all that. But we were not a super religious family. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that we did not pray the rosary or say grace at meals or talk about God a lot or anything like that. I did not go to a Catholic school. I certainly did not go to a Jesuit school. And I fulfilled my religious duties out of a sense of obligation. And then, I went to not a Catholic high school and not a Catholic college. And I didn't get exposed to the Jesuits till I was 27 years old. But I grew up Catholic, but not, I always say, super Catholic.
Well, Father James Martin, thank you very much for your information about yourself. So it also helped me to know you and the followers to know more about you. Who is Father James Martin? He was before. So, Father James, what did you do before entering the Society of Jesus?
Yeah, well, I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I studied at what is called the Wharton School of Business. For those who aren't familiar, Wharton, Wharton. It's a big business school in the United States. I studied economics, but also finance and accounting. And then I thought I was going to have a career as a business person. I took a job with General Electric, GE, in New York City in 1982, and I thought that would be my whole career. It was a very exciting time to be a young executive. I was making a lot of money, and it was interesting. But then gradually, as I'm sure a lot of people feel, business is a real vocation for many people, a real vocation and a way to contribute to the common good. But as I was saying, as many people feel, I started to feel like I was in the wrong place. Like this is not interesting to me. My friends really like business, but I started to find it boring. I started to find it stressful, and I tried to figure out a way out. But I couldn't find a way out until I stumbled upon the writings of Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, the American Trappist monk. So that's what I was doing before my entrance into the society.
Father James, pardon me if I say I use some research from ChatGPT to find about who you are. So I read some news of even from Google said after transformative experience watching a documentary of a Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, and you discern to enter the Society of Jesus. So let me ask you, why did you choose to be a Jesuit instead of a Trappist monk? Is there something behind this decision that you would like to share to the world?
That's a great question. When I watched the documentary about Thomas Merton, again, for people who don't know, it's Merton, Thomas Merton. I didn't know much about monastic life or life in a religious order. I had never heard of him. But the film, the documentary, was so interesting that I wanted to read about him. By the way, that film is now available on YouTube. It's called Merton, a film biography. You can look it up. It's about a half an hour. It's very simple. And his life seems so beautiful. Life in the monastery, my brother, as you know, many Jesuits are drawn to that monastic life. I think underneath us, there's a little bit of a monk, which I think St. Ignatius would like. And it just seems so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I read more and more about the Trappists. To be honest, I knew that I didn't think I could be a Trappist. The life of silence and, praying 7 times a day, being withdrawn. I went to my parish priest and I said, I think I'd like to be a priest. So priesthood was something that came first because I didn't know much about religious life, as many people don't. And he said, well, you should talk to the local vocation office in the part of the United States I was living. And you should also try the Jesuits because the Jesuits were very close by at a university called Fairfield University in Connecticut. That was it. That was the connection. And once I found out about the Jesuits and all the things that they did, they really appealed to me. And I met them, and they just seemed so normal, or as normal as they could be. Uh, Initially, I liked what they did. I liked the idea that you could be a teacher and a Jesuit. You could be a parish priest or pastor and a Jesuit. You could be a writer and a Jesuit. You could be a social worker and a Jesuit. You could be a missionary and a Jesuit. You could work with refugees and be a Jesuit. So many different things. And so it was really what they did. But once I entered, it was who they are, or who we are and our spirituality. But initially it was the being able to do different things that appealed to me. And I never really thought about monastic life seriously. And then I'll confess something to you. I didn't do a whole lot of research because I thought, well, I can try this out, and if I don't like it, I'll leave. But I entered, and that was 40 years ago.
So do you still find yourself somehow a Trappist where there is silence and also do you find yourself in a Jesuit that there is a silence moment? How was the connection there, Father?
Great question. Yes, there's a part of me, and I think there's a part of all Jesuits who has a contemplative vocation. So St. Ignatius wanted us to be contemplatives in action. Right now, I'm reading the letters and the diaries of St. Peter Faber, who was one of the original Jesuits, and it's all interior for him. And I think there's a great attraction for Jesuits to the interior life, of course, right? We all have to have an interior life and a life of contemplation. But I think for a lot of Jesuits, there really is that draw or call to monasticism. But I know that that's not my vocation. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I did a retreat at Thomas Merton's monastery, the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky. And I was so excited. I thought, oh, this is going to be so beautiful. And it was very beautiful, very quiet. But, they pray, I think it's 7 times a day. And I started to think I I was I was I was not how do I say it? I started to feel, oh my gosh, I was just praying, it's time to do more work. And I said to my spiritual director, a Jesuit, I said I felt guilty that I didn't enjoy it more, right? That I didn't feel like this is, and he said it was very helpful. He said, "Well, that's not your vocation. You're not a Trappist, you're a Jesuit." And a Trappist would feel uncomfortable in the Jesuit world. So it was a reminder to me that, this is my vocation, this is who I am. But there's always a longing and a love and a real romance for monastic life and the Trappist life in particular. I still find it very beautiful.
Thank you very much, Father James. So, my following question is, how was the reaction of your parents or friends or loved ones, um, to you when you decided to enter the religious life? Is there any negative or not negative reaction, but is there any um reaction about your decision to enter the religious life?
Yeah, it was almost all negative. My parents were horrified because I'd never really shared anything about this part of myself with them. Not out of a sense of secrecy. I wasn't secret about it. It was very late in coming. And to them, they thought it was very rash and ill considered. My mother was horrified. She cried. My father was upset. My friends thought I was crazy because I hadn't really talked about this with anybody, and it was somewhat sudden. And a lot of people, a lot of people thought I was joining a cult. That they didn't know the Jesuits. They thought it was like a cult. My parents were upset that I had, according to them, wasted my business education. Why did you go to school to study business if you're not going to have a business career? But when they saw that I was happy, they were relaxed. And I'll tell you, the thing that changed them the most, and this might be helpful for people who are thinking about a religious vocation or even Jesuits who are listening. What helped them the most was not me talking about the Society of Jesus, not me giving them books on the Society of Jesus, not me showing them movies about the Jesuits, not me talking about the exercises, nothing. It was meeting other Jesuits. And they thought, oh, these people are very nice and they're normal and I can talk to them. And that was a big help that they were normal people that my parents and my family could talk to. But I think it took them a couple of years to get used to it. The other funny thing is my mother said, "Oh, that's terrible. They're going to send you to Africa." And I said, "No, that's ridiculous. They're not going to send me to Africa." And 3 years later, I did my regency in Africa. So she was not happy. But now, I mean, now it's 40 years later, everybody accepts it and they're happy and there's no problem. But very few positive responses at the beginning.
I think they are the happiest than you because when they see your well-known, prominent Jesuits, everyone knows. No, I think everyone knows about you, Father, who is Father James Martins. Your book is really helpful for many people
Thank you.
who's reading it.
Thank you.
So even I have some books at my back, so I'm
I see
enjoying reading
that.
your books. So even some
Thank
of
you.
my friends they are enjoying reading your book. So that's why
Thank you.
I'm trying my best to find a way how can I get Father James Martin's email so that I can contact him? But
Well,
finally,
you have the catalog, so that's a good way to start.
uh, so another question is Father James. As a Jesuit, we live out our vows: poverty, chastity, obedience, and the fourth vows to obey obedience to the Pope. So how do you see these vows? It is as a burden or it is as a gift of freedom allow you to love?
That's a big question. I see the vows. I see poverty essentially as very freeing, that I don't have to own things. Everything that I earn, all the money from my books goes to the Jesuits. I find it very freeing. I don't find poverty that difficult, actually. I mean, Jesuits, we're not living in the streets. We're not living in that way, right? We're not living the life of a homeless person, right? We have food and a place to sleep. I find it very freeing. There are some things I miss, right? I can't buy nice presents for my family at Christmas. That's something I miss. I can't, you know, I can't buy a vacation house, obviously. But there are Jesuit vacation houses. So poverty is not as difficult. I mean, it's still difficult, but it's all this, I should say, is an imitation of Jesus, right? Who lived poor, chaste, and obedient. Chastity, I think, is more difficult, just naturally. But also, it can sometimes be lonely. But I find that more and more, I'm more at peace with it because I've been blessed with so many Jesuit friends and other friends, and it creates a space, I think, for people in my prayer and in my daily life. So I've gotten more comfortable with that. Obedience has also not been a problem. Sometimes I can't say certain things that I'd like to say or write certain things that I'd like to write, but that's okay. It's not big things. And my superiors have been very just supportive of me just in general. So I think the vows are they're a way of living. They don't work for everybody, but they work for me. And it's at once it's a gift to me, but it's also a gift to God. But I really see them in terms of freedom. Poverty frees you from the need to worry about money and career. I certainly don't worry about that. Uh, Chastity frees you from, the connection to one person, right? And depending on one person and having that one person depend on you frees you to love many, many people. Obedience also frees you from a certain careerism because you do what you're told. So I find it very freeing. I really do. It's not, look, no life is perfect and no life is without the struggles, but I do find it very freeing.
So, Father James, so how you live your life almost 40 years, already 40 years as a Jesuit. So how do you see your life now as a Jesuit?
As a kind of mystery, I find that every year on retreat, I think about my vocation, my original call. And, it's funny you should ask that. I don't think I've shared this before. I often think of God rescuing me from my former life. That's how I look at it. You rescued me, not that I was dying or, you know, suicidal or miserable, but I was pretty unhappy. And I just see God as sort of pulling me out of that world of business, which was not for me, and inviting me into this home, which is the Society of Jesus. I'll share something else. Jesuits will understand this. I was making my annual retreat at a Jesuit retreat house this couple weeks ago, and it was the what's called the province retreat. So on the province retreat, many Jesuits go. Often Jesuits can do their own retreat at some other retreat house, but I really enjoy the province retreat. And at Mass one day, while a friend of mine was presiding, I looked around and I thought, and there were Jesuits from many ages. And I thought, well, this Jesuit was my teacher, my professor. This Jesuit was my spiritual director. This Jesuit is my friend. This Jesuit comes to me for spiritual direction. This Jesuit was in my novice class. This Jesuit I know it was this just sort of almost like this tapestry of all of these different people at different times in my life. And I have not had this experience before. I thought, my gosh, I am so firmly embedded in this world, kind of woven into this fabric, this tapestry in different ways with different people, that it's just who I am now. And so that's kind of how I see it. I think it was a really powerful experience. It wasn't some mystical experience, but I looked around and I thought, I am really part of this community in so many ways. So that's kind of how I see it, but primarily as a gift. I see it as the greatest gift that I've been given. And but still a mystery. Still I wake up and I say, I sometimes I look at myself in a collar and I say, I can't believe this.
I like the what I mentioned about the mystery, So we don't know what is happening, but by the providence of God, God provides what we need. So I like that word, Father. So how about can you say a little bit about the community life? Because as a
Mhm.
Jesuit, we live in a community life. Can you give some information about the importance of the community life as a Jesuit?
Well, I think about Pope Leo, who recently announced just a few days ago that he was going to live with some of his Augustinian brothers in the Vatican. Did you see that? So Pope Leo is a real member of a religious order, and I think this is one of the reasons that Pope Francis lived in Casa Santa Marta, the guest house, because he wanted to have people around him. Unlike a parish priest who would live in a rectory, and sometimes with one or two other priests, sometimes by himself, the member of a religious order, like the Jesuits, lives in a community. So, what does that mean? I live in a community currently with 10 people. We're in New York. We have mass together. We we have dinner together. We have social together. We all have different jobs. Only two of us work at America Media. Some people work in a school, high school. Some people work at Fordham University. Um, some people work in the province office. Some are studying. So it's a wonderful mix of people. It's a very good community. Uh, and I think what I like is it's just these are nice guys. They're nice people. They're supportive of me. They're interesting. It's harder to get selfish if you're in a community, right? You can't, it's hard to be, I mean, you can be selfish if you want to, but you're asked to do different things for people and do different house jobs. But it's not perfect. You know, St. John Berkman's, I'm sure you know this quote, the Jesuit saint said, "Life in community is my greatest penance. Via communis est mea maxima penitentiae." Now, many people say he meant the common life of everyday people, but most Jesuits know he meant life in community. Because it can be tough living with people that you don't choose to live with. But we all together are focused on God, focused on our vocations. And so there's a commonality. You know, recently I read an article about groups of adults who are living together intentionally, was in the New York Times. And they're having these group homes. And I thought, that's a great idea. But if you don't have a shared mission or value, it can be hard. So, you know, we're all Jesuits. We're all under the provincial. We're all under Father General. We're all under the Pope. So there's an understanding of how things are discussed, how things are decided, and as we say, our way of proceeding. So there's a real commonality there. So I like living in community. I do like it, but it's not perfect, as you know.
Thank you very much, Father James, for your honesty to live in the community, which is not perfect, but we try our best to live as friends in the Lord, help one another, to serve one another, as you mentioned, to focus on God. So thank you very much
Well,
for this.
you're welcome. I'll share a quote from Thomas Merton, which has been very helpful. I think I've memorized it. The first and most elemental test of anyone's religious vocation, whether it's Jesuit, Trappist, Carthusian, Franciscan, is the recognition that everyone who lives in your community is more or less imperfect. And that's true. And that's including myself.
That's very true for
That is
everyone.
true. Everyone's imperfect. And I mean, I'm imperfect. Some people drive me crazy. I'm sure I drive some people crazy. I'm sure I do. And so you really it's also great for your humility. I'll tell you a funny story. When I came back from the synod, I was a delegate at the synod for 2 sessions. And someone said to me, "Well, what did your community do when you come back? Did they have a big welcome home party for you? And did you give them a speech?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" I mean, they said, "How was your trip?" But, I'm just another member of the community. So it keeps you humble, I think.
Father James, since you mentioned about the synod, so let me ask you something aside from your vocation story. So, what does the church need in today's world to act modestly and prudently amidst the advances of technology, specifically artificial intelligence? So does it weaken the faith of believers, or um does it enhance the faith of believers?
You mean does AI
Yeah, that's right.
influence? Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not sure I'm the expert to answer this. I don't do a lot of work with AI. What I see is actually more dangerous, I think, than anything else. A couple things come to mind. First, when we think about how it affects students, and I'm sure you experience this,
That's right.
uh, I've read so many articles that say that students are using AI to write their papers, and it's very tempting. I'll tell you why it's tempting. A few weeks ago, for our podcast, The Spiritual Life, I write an article to accompany each interview. And one of the people I work with to help me get quotes ran the podcast through an AI program that pulled out quotes, which was helpful so that I didn't have to type them. And, you know, the AI program also wrote some paragraphs about the quotes. It was very tempting not to use that, but I thought I can't, you know. And if I did, it wouldn't sound like me. But I could see how tempting it would be if you're in a deadline, if you're a student. So I can see that temptation, but it would be wrong to do. It's not your work, right? The second thing I find really disturbing is just this weekend, I heard a number of stories on the radio about people who had fallen in love with their chat GPT person, and it took them away from their marriages. And then I heard a radio story about people who were suicidal who were not helped by ChatGPT because ChatGPT tends to reinforce what you're thinking. Oh, that's very good. Oh, good idea. Keep going. And I'm thinking, maybe this is unfair, but it's a lot like the way that Saint Ignatius says the evil spirit works, right? Keep going. What's the problem when you're going from bad to worse? Now, in some cases, it's harmless. I mean, if you're, I don't know, if you're looking for directions online or something like that. But I get a little worried about it. And then I see things like the robots they're making in China that are like human beings that can chase people. It's very dystopian. So I wish that there were more reflection on it because my sense is that the people who are creating these things are not doing a lot of reflection. Now, I know the Vatican has been very good about this, and Pope Leo, in fact, has talked about it, I think, on the first or second day that he was Pope. So it's interesting that Pope Leo the 13th talked about the Industrial Revolution, and Pope Leo the 14th might talk about the AI revolution.
So Father James, as a Jesuit, so what can the Jesuits in general to do to contribute to the world and the church today? I know you know a lot about the church. Not everything, but you have a knowledge about the church. So what can we do to contribute to the church today, Father?
Well, Jesuits have always been, well, I'll say for each Jesuit that it depends on their own discernment and what their superiors say. So one Jesuit might be a teacher in a high school, another Jesuit might be a PhD, another Jesuit might work in a parish or a retreat house. So in many ways, it depends. But the society, I think Pope Benedict has said this. The society is always on the margins where the churches where the Jesuits are, where the church needs to be, kind of on the margins. Migrants and refugees, people who are excluded, like LGBT people, who I work with sometimes, the poor, the sick, right? Agnostics and atheists. I remember Paul VI gave us a special mission to combat atheism. So in those places where the church is kind of on the borders, I think geographically and existentially, that's where we're called to be. Um, but really, I have Jesuit brothers who are high school teachers, who are retreat directors, who work with prison inmates. I'm just thinking of some who are physicians, who are writers. So they do all sorts of things, and I think that that's a real grace in the Society of Jesus. The old expression, if you've met one American, you've met them all, something like that. Well, the old expression in the Jesuits is if you've met one Jesuit, you've met one Jesuit, because we're all so different.
So, Father James, you have a big followers or following in the Catholic Church. No, you are the communicators of the Catholic Church, and how is the importance of the communication for the church? As you know,
Well,
you have all channels, but podcasts, you have writings and talks. So what was the importance of the communication for the church?
well, I think it's proclaiming the gospel to the ends of the earth, which is what Jesus asks us to do in many ways. I often think it's going where people are, and Jesus went where people were in two ways. I always like to think about this, and you're doing this with your podcast. When Jesus called the first disciples, he went from Nazareth to Capernaum. So he physically went where they were, right? He physically got up from Nazareth, went to the Sea of Galilee, and called Peter and Andrew and James and John. Okay. So he went to where they were. And that's what you're doing on this podcast. You're going to where they are. They're online. They're listening to you. They're on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all these places. But just as important is that when he arrived at the Sea of Galilee, he spoke in their language. What does that mean? Now, that means obviously he spoke in Aramaic. They all spoke Aramaic, which was a form of Hebrew. But what I mean was, he said to Peter and Andrew, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of people." So he's using fishing language. He's a carpenter from Nazareth. He could have used carpentry language, right? He could have said, "Let us construct the reign of God," or "Let us build the house of God," or "Let us sand down the rough edges of humanity." But he chose to speak to Peter and Andrew and James and John in the language that they understood. And also the miracle that he does in Luke chapter 5 for Peter, right? The catch of fish, which is actually right over my desk. Maybe you can see it, the catch of fish.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah,
It's
is
beautiful.
is done in Peter's language, if you think about it. The language, what is the language that he does that miracle in? It's fish. And you think, well, maybe Peter had seen his mother-in-law healed. Maybe he saw someone physically healed, right? In the synagogue at Capernaum. But fish, that's he knows that. He knows fish. So Jesus not only goes to where people are, but he speaks in their language. And that's, I think, what we need to do in the church. And that's what I myself, with many other people like yourself, try to do on social media and try to do in my books, right? Which is just go to where they are and speak to them in their language. So I think that's always been a helpful image for me.
So, Father James, as the synod of synodality, I mean, you were there. So, do you see any improvement and effectiveness change within the church after this synod of synodality? So, how can you say about it, Father James?
Well, I think that the synod is going to have to be implemented now. The final document, which people can read online, which is quite beautiful, invites us to a church that is more welcoming, more inclusive, and more participatory. That's the idea. that people from all levels of the church should be involved in the decision making and the decision taking. But that's going to take a while for people to come to accept and understand. And I think that there, is still some resistance about that. If you're a person, say a bishop or a pastor who is used to making decisions by himself, and now you're told you have to have a parish council or this diocesan synod or this and that, it can be a strange feeling. But I think that once people participate in the process, they understand how wonderful it is, where you really listen to people. I heard a really interesting comment from a bishop from, I think, Cameroon, I believe, at my table, who said that he had taken this decision and consulted widely with the lay people and the staff and the parishes and all the different people in the diocese. And he said that when he made the decision, it meant that people were able to accept it better because they had participated in it. I thought that was really interesting. That the carrying out of the decision, I'm not sure what the decision was, which might have been difficult, was easier because people knew that he had listened and that they were part of the decision, and then they were fine with it. So I think that's part of the process.
So, Father James, thank you very much. I think this is the last for our conversation. So, a final message. What wisdom would you like to share with the young Jesuit like us?
Ah, that's a great question. What wisdom? Well, I would say for young Jesuits, I would say a few things. Number one, always remember your first call. When things get tough and it's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and things feel like they're stale, remember that it was Jesus who called you into this ministry. And he did that for a reason. And even if things are difficult, remember that first call. I always think of St. Peter, right? After Jesus calls him, it's very exciting. He sees the miracles and the public ministry. Then he has to see the passion, the death. He sees the resurrection. But then Jesus leaves at the ascension, and Peter's by himself. I mean, he has the church, but he has to carry out his ministry. I imagine he always thought back to that first call. So always remember your first call and let it give you energy. I would say the second thing, this is very specific to Jesuits, is there are two levels of formation, I always say. There's the visible level and the invisible level. The visible level is what you read about in the vocation literature. Novitiate, first vows, long retreat, first studies, regency, theology, work, tertianship, all the things that are public in a sense, and sometimes very public, right? You take vows and you're ordained and you take final vows and you're teaching and you wear a collar. That's very important formation, that you are formed in that way. But then there's an invisible level of formation. You have struggles, you have spiritual crises, you have to go see a psychologist, you have a difficult retreat, you fall in love, you have a clash with the superior, and you're formed in that way, right? If you're open to it through spiritual direction, maybe through therapy, you're formed in that way. I think they're both important. You can't neglect either the visible or the invisible level. In other words, you can't just be seen as kind of going through the motions without a really deep transformation of yourself. That's the second thing I would say. Um, and then the third thing I think is to always be really serious about your spiritual training and your retreats and your direction, because it's easy. This may seem strange to hear as a young Jesuit, but once you're ordained and once you have final vows, it's up to you to go to regular direction, 8-day retreats, right? To really take that seriously. And I know, I won't say who, there are Jesuits who let that slide. And I think that to really to always make your 8-day retreat with the director, not just say, oh, I'm going to go off and read a few books and relax. That's not a retreat. So it's taking that spiritual formation seriously. So I would say those three things. Remember your original call. Remember the invisible level of formation. And the third thing is take your spiritual formation and direction and prayer really seriously because that's going to be up to you. I mean, your provincial will ask you every year, but it really is up to you. And I think if you do that, you'll be a happy Jesuit.
So, Father James Martin, thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated. Much insight that I learned. I hope this will reach out to many people to learn something from our conversation. So thank you very much for your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom. It really helps me and the people to know, to follow, to love God more and more. Thank you very much, Father James, for this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me on. Blessings on your formation. And to all who are listening, all my Jesuit brothers who are listening, blessings on your formation. And please keep me in your prayers. Thanks very much.
Hean Ba Klean!